I am sure that all of you have seen the multiple messages from us about Pitchapalooza happening over the next couple months. Pitchapalooza is the name that we came up with for all of the pitch-related events that are happening from September through November. And I know it's a little confusing because we are partnering with Kidlit GN, which is a separate organization that has their own pitching stuff going on, and we have our pitching stuff going on, but we like each other, and so we're cross promoting. But it is a little confusing that there are two sort of big pitching events that are coming up, and I'm just going to explain it briefly. So Kidlit GN in October on their website has an event that is a few days long, I believe, where you upload your pitch, and it's a very short, they have instructions on what you need to submit, and it's very short. And then they're going to be inviting editors, agents, art directors to come to their website, look at everybody's pitch, and make comments if they're interested in seeing more. So it's basically taking a Twitter pitch event and redoing it on their own website instead of on, sorry, it's not Twitter, it's X. Okay. But, and then Pitch Fest, KCU Pitch Fest is a competition that we hold where there is an entry fee. The structure of it is quite different. It's not like a Twitter pitch event. It's more like a juried competition. We have a panel of judges who are agents and editors, and they're really amazing. I would love for you to look at our website and see the full list of people who are on the panel. They go through the submissions, and then we do a big gallery reveal on November 4th when we show all the people who have been selected as for recognition and as winners. And then as soon as that gallery is open, then we make a huge announcement to the wider industry. And the other thing that's different between us and Kidlit GN is that the gallery stays on our website. It doesn't go away, so you can still see the gallery from last year from our Pitch Fest submissions. Okay, big long spiel about pitch stuff. Now let's get into the meat of what we're going to be talking about today. Today is just a roundtable panel discussion with some awesome people here. We have Lauren Stohler, Carolyn Hu, Nadia Solomon, Brigitta Blair, and Rivka Lafi, who are going to be chatting with you guys about their own experiences pitching their projects. So maybe the way we could start this is just with a really short intro from each of you about a little bit about who you are and what you're working on right now. So I'm going to go in order of boxes. So Carolyn, could you start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Caroline, and I've been a member of KCU since the beginning of this calendar year. And so far, I am only self-published. I make comics inspired by my experiences as a scientist and nature. And currently, I actually just started a job as a biology professor. Some of you might have heard that there was a group I was running called Agent Quest over the summer, where over 10 weeks, just as for camaraderie, we just every week took a step closer to submitting a pitch. And so I submitted 4 pitches at the end of the summer.
Awesome.
Sorry, same pitch, 4 different agents.
Okay, got it. Lauren.
Unmute. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Stohler. I was previously published in picture books, and so my first graphic novel series is Gnome and Rat, and I just finished turning in the final art for book 3, so my brain is a little melty, and that's my story.
All right, yay. Rivka.
Making comics does make for melty brains. I hear you. I'm Rivka Lafi. I am author-illustrator. I've done My first two graphic novels were from Tokyo Pop in 2005 and 2007, but currently I'm working on a graphic novel about creative writing with First Second, which is killing me. Hopefully not literally, but that's why I have this. And I'm also working on a graphic novel with Candlewick. So, and that one is a young adult magical realism, and it's turning into 620 pages, and it's insanely long now. So, and apologies if I'm occasionally off and on camera because I have a new puppy who just came home on Friday. So forgive me if I pop in and out a little bit.
All right, cool. Let's see. Brigitta.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Brigitta and I'm a graphic novelist. So I'm an author illustrator with my debut graphic novel coming out in 2027 with Little Brown called Cramming, which you may have seen in the KCU Pitch Fest. So thank you to that. But yeah, so outside of being an author illustrator, I also work in the video game industry. So I work for a company called Ubisoft. And then I've also done a lot of work just in tech throughout my life. So yeah, it's great to be here and talk about pitching.
All right, Nadia.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I am a traditionally published author, and I have 2 books coming out in 2024 and 2025. And unlike everyone else, I don't have a graphic novel yet, but I'm working towards that goal with Rivka and Jana, who have been very supportive in trying to help me get the 2 graphic novels that I'm working on published. And I'm close in the sense that I have synopses and I have, the ideas and the start of a script, but I just always felt lost in the process of getting there. And last year I participated in the pitching event, and that helped me put a package together where I've submitted both of the manuscripts in for evaluation through SCBWI to editors, and they actually want the manuscript, but I'm stuck, and so that's why I'm here.
All
And
right.
so it's like, it's a positive, but like strangely odd predicament to be in, but
Nadia, I'm sure you're going to get more into this, but I'm so happy that you mentioned all of that because I'm really excited that we have people at all different stages on this panel because I think it's so important to hear from people from many different vantage points and stages in the journey. So the next question that I have for you, and I should pause and say that everybody here, please get your questions ready in your head because I am going to have Q&A for all of you to ask your questions of the panel. But before we get to that, I just want to hear from each of you, if you could pick one project and kind of tell us the pitching story about it. Like, where'd you get the idea? What was your original plan with it? How has it evolved? Have you gotten any nibbles or did it get signed up, and like what happened as a result of that? So maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. And Nadia, since you kind of started talking about it, you could continue on with your story.
sure. Well, I have 2, but like the one that everyone's familiar with and the one that I pitched last year is called My Pet Phoenix, and that started out as a picture book. And when I submitted it to my agent, she was like, "This is not a picture book." And so I was like, then what can it be? Because I didn't really think of it as a graphic novel, but because it has fantastical elements and it has a lot of drama, I guess you would say, I thought about it, and she recommended that I position it as more of a middle grade, but I've never written middle grade, so I was like, I only think in pictures, and I only feel like I can tell the story in pictures. And so I was encouraged to turn it into a graphic novel. And so I did, and I had, the synopsis done, and she accepted my synopsis, but when it came time to write it is where I started having problems because I got stuck in that dark horse format. And for some reason, I just can't get myself out of that format. And so I've been trying to work really hard towards as an author only or text only try to figure out a good format or way to write the pictures that I see in my head down as a script to submit to one of the editors that I had submitted it to, because I don't know if Stan Yan is on here, but he was at one of the pitching events through SCBWI where I pitched that package, and that editor was like, I really love it. Do you have the manuscript? And I'm like, no. And she was like, I need a completed manuscript because, you're only a picture book writer, and I don't know what your script is going to look like, but I'd like to see the whole thing. So it's been a year. And so I've been, talking behind the scenes with Jana and Rivka about how do I get this from idea and half mangled script to an actual script. But I was able to learn how to pitch last year when we did this the first time, and it was super fast, but it gave me the lesson that I learned from having been a part of that event is what a pitch package entails, so that every single time I've used that template or what I've learned, I've been able to get nibbles. So I can't say enough about being here and being a part of the program, but sadly I just haven't been able to get through the writing part of it, and so that's why I'm still kind of figuring my way out. But
I'm really interested that you mentioned the Dark Horse script thing, because that is a big, I hear it mentioned all the time. So have you changed the approach? Are you still trying to fit that approach, or are you doing it differently now?
I'm trying to do it differently. So now it's really weird because I'm kind of pulling like the picture book text and then kind of writing down like ideas of like what I want to happen next, and then kind of writing to that. But then because I'm writing, I feel like the script is not really in caption and dialogue like in the way that I envision it, but like I can envision the panels and the emotion that I want, but I just can't write it. It's like I'm stuck. And so and then now I feel like I have a block because when I look at the Dark Horse text and I'm trying to pull the stuff out from it to reformat it, my brain just does not compute.
All right, Nadia, I feel like I want to have a whole long conversation with you about this, but we should move on to the other people.
I know.
Just stop looking at that Dark Horse script thing.
I know, I have to.
Don't look at it. All right, let's see, reverse order. Brigitta, can you tell us your story?
Images for my story too, if that's okay for me to share.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. So we're going to take a step back into time when I thought I wanted to do picture books and ended up pivoting. So I'll just quickly go through this because I know we don't have a ton of time. But essentially I broke it up into what it was like to pitch to agents versus editors. So in the early stages, I did a lot of Twitter pitches for the picture book site ideas I had, and I got 0 agent likes. So essentially, for those who don't know what Twitter pitches are, essentially, if an agent or an editor is interested, they will like your post, and then it's an invite to submit to them. So despite the fact that I got 106 retweets, I got 0 agent likes. So just a fun little tidbit. So I started pivoting into speed pitches, but I, again, didn't get any interest. Speed pitches are kind of like speed dating, but for pitching a book. So we did that through SCBWI. They have a lot of speed pitch events. And essentially I got a lot of feedback that they either liked it, but they didn't represent picture books. It would be challenging to sell with the current market for both of my stories. And everybody kept on saying your style works better as a graphic novel. And I got that a lot. So I started thinking, well, I liked manga comics as a kid. Let me give it a shot. So I took a class, loved it, and then ended up doing another speed pitch event for this book called Disconnected. And what was interesting was for this speed pitch event I did for this book, I was the only graphic novelist that showed images. Everybody else only did picture books, and it was just auditory. So I think it gave me a little bit of an extra advantage, but I only showed the cover, no spreads or anything. And the feedback I got was, first off, it needed to be middle grade. And I was initially pitching as YA or young adult. The next thing was I needed to make sure I included my backstory to connect to the characters. And finally, she said that she loved it and thought it was marketable. which at the time I didn't realize that that's kind of like an invitation to submit to her, but I just didn't know. So I decided to do Twitter pitching again. So essentially, this is the big golden pitch that got me the most agent likes. This is the one that actually got me my current agent. But you'll kind of notice a couple of things that I switched up from the first time I pitched. So using a ton of hashtags is a really big thing. That's a lot of times how agents and editors find you. They'll just search for the event and then the hashtag. So even for like the KCU event or, the Kidlit GN, making sure you have those categories listed is really helpful so agents and editors can find your work. So definitely include the more the merrier. Images, especially sequentials, they're great. And then also, it's not necessarily about how many people interact, but it's about who interacts with your post. Because the first one I had over 100 retweets, but 0 agent likes. This one I had 11 retweets and then several agent likes. So just to keep in mind that it's not all based off that, but just to give some statistics for the new pitch, I submitted to 3 pitch events. Funny enough, one of them was Kidlit GN. And I ended up getting a total of 14 requests, both from agents and editors. So you can kind of see the breakdown of the different pitch events and then also who asked me to submit to them. Here's also some query stats. And mind you, I only queried people who asked me to query them through the Twitter pitch events. So I queried 8 agents. I got 6 who requested more materials and then 5 offers. So you can kind of see some people, they gave me a no response, rejection, or they had to pull out due to time restraints. But eventually that's how I landed my agent. I got on the agent call, loved her. And then we pivoted to pitching to editors and try to make this quick. But on my agent call with my current agent, we actually came up with a new book idea, which is the book you guys saw in the Pitch Fest, in case you were here last year. So we pivoted from Disconnected to this new book because we thought it would sell a little bit better and would be a better debut than Disconnected would have been. And so you can kind of see here, we brainstormed things like the cover designs, and then we submitted. And essentially the most common feedback we got was there was too much white space around the borders, which was actually a formatting issue. So just keep in mind when you are pitching pitch packages, they might take everything literally. So if your file size doesn't match your book size, they might take it as you have a ton of negative space when you actually don't. So we had to like reformat the sizing of the actual document. Some people didn't like the beginning and others didn't like the style. So we took that feedback and you can kind of see the progression of like the very first iteration before my agent got it. It was actually like a blue and like black and white style. Then we pivoted to color and then we got feedback from a lot of editors saying that they wanted them to look a little bit more mature because it was upper middle grade. So we switched to that. And then you can also kind of see just how this was the initial kind of page we sent. And then we transitioned to this, which was the same period of time in the book. And then we eventually actually rewrote the entire beginning, sent an entire new set of pages and spreads to the editors who hadn't responded to us. And then we started getting bites eventually, so you can kind of see the transition with the cover as well. But we got bites after the KCU Pitch Fest. So we actually had an agent who was in the KCU Pitch Fest who didn't respond to us early on, immediately when saw the Pitch Fest, reached out. And then we started getting a ton of other editors reach out to us after the Pitch Fest, which ended up becoming an auction, which essentially means that multiple editors made an offer on your book. And then we ended up choosing one of them who I absolutely adore, Jessica from Little Brown. And that's kind of the whole story in a nutshell. So everything from the agent to the editor to now I'm currently working on my book. So yeah.
Oh, Brigitta. Wow. Awesome. Okay, Rivka.
Was it me next or Lauren?
I'm going in reverse order from what I did before. So you're next and then Lauren.
Okay, that's good. It's waited a bit because my dog was literally zooming around. She stopped her zoomies. It's ADHD and doing a presentation is tough. I'm sorry. So project. I'm going to talk about, I guess, 5 wishes because Jan is familiar with this because Jan is my agent and she helped me pitch 5 wishes. So 5 wishes is actually an idea that I had got a really long time ago. It started out as an idea with a boy who finds 5 wishes. That literally was the seed idea. And the visual in my head was he was being chased by a bunch of girls. Then what happens with the wishes, what happens in his life, everything else that kind of came out of it actually happened much later. It started as a concept, but I didn't actually sit down and write the story until actually COVID had started. And I was working on a book with First Second, and my writer she had stuff going on because of COVID. So I was waiting for a script. I was like, what am I going to do? So I pulled out 5 wishes, the concept. I literally keep like a treasure box of ideas. I just pulled out the idea that I had, and I sat down and wrote the script in 14 days. So I'm a very fast writer. Thankfully, I am a very slow artist though. So this book will probably take many years to put together. The pitch itself took about 5 months to put it all together. I could share what it looked like real quick, or do we want to wait for that later, Jana?
You could go ahead and share if you have it.
Okay, let me share my screen with you guys. Yeah, the art took a lot longer than the script. I'll say that. So my pitch was very plain. Can y'all see that? It says 5 wishes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my pitch, the actual like pitch packet, I like very simple text. My art has a lot of texture in it, is fairly complicated. So I created a pitch packet that was very simple to sort of balance out some of the complexity of my art. So just 5 Wishes by Rivka Lafi. It would help if there we go, sample finished art. I did several finished pages. I envisioned this as 3-color limited palette because it's young adult. So it's an older book. It doesn't need to be in a whole bunch of really bright colors. I knew it was going to be a lot of pages. So I kind of had a vision in mind of these sort of purples, yellows, greens, and blues. And so did a couple sample pages, really played up my backgrounds because I love backgrounds and texture. So there's a lot of rain in this book, so I knew how to show rain, and some sample pages of people actually talking and moving. So, and then it changed from opening with finished art to sample rough art. And what I did is I don't necessarily believe in, oh, you need to do exactly 20 pages to show the book. I actually showed enough to create a cliffhanger. So you meet the character, but the main character, Charlie, this boy here, he doesn't really start to interact or really talk that much until later. So I didn't want to just have like these girls chasing him. It wasn't enough. So I have a bunch of the scene where he finds like this wish with the seed and this old lady, and she tells him, you got to plant it to make them come true. So there's enough of the story to kind of tease the editor. There's interaction between the main character and this older woman, Wyla. And finally, he's been like carrying this box around. What's in the box? Finally, in that moment where she's like, he sets the box down and she opens it. That was the final page. That was like, okay, editor, what happens next? So I ended on a tease with my pitch in the hopes that I'm giving you a taste. I'm showing you enough of the main character. I'm showing you some of the secondary characters. I'm showing dialogue. I'm showing finished art and sample art. And I did a wow page. This was actually Jana's recommendation. I was like, there's kind of some cool factory scenes. I wanted to show something that was like, I want them to literally look at it and be wow. So I did one of those. These are all of my art is analog, but I digitize the colors. So they're actually watercolor washes that I scan in, and then I break them into, it's not a gradient map, but it's similar to gradient mapping, where I break them into different layers based on light tone, mid-tone, and dark tone. It's kind of a complicated process. I've got it automated now. And I did a few character sketches. I showed the character at a slightly older age as well as a younger age. And honestly, his design really hasn't come through until just recently. So I kind of constantly develop my characters as I'm going. And I've got my other characters, and then that was it. But the big part of that, really, honestly, the big part of my pitch was the manuscript. Having a complete manuscript. I feel, and I asked my editor this later, she's like, what really sold you on this? She said it was the writing and the art, but it was definitely the writing. And I felt like that was my strongest foot forward, was having a completed manuscript. And I do believe that it got me a bigger advance having a complete manuscript. I'm sure we could argue about that if you wanted later, Jana, but there you go.
Yep. And you had a lot of publisher interest. I mean, a lot of offers on this project.
Yeah, it went to auction with, was it 5 publishers?
I'm forgetting if it was 4 or 5, but yeah, it was
It
multiple.
was at least 5. One of them dropped out a little early because it was going too high.
Mhm.
So I did sell it for 6 figures, but we actually ended up selling 2 books for 6 figures each. And so like that's the first time for me anything's ever gone to auction. The first time anything's done so well. My previous book was 30,000. So, and the one before that was 12,000. So it was definitely a whirlwind experience. And and the book sold in like 2 weeks. From us pitching it, which I was like, oh, it's going to take 2 years. Nope, it was 2 weeks. So it was an interesting experience.
Yes, indeed. All right, Lauren, I did download your images. So do you want me to share my screen?
Let me see what happens if I try it, and maybe it will work and maybe it will not. Let me just open this up. So I am talking about Gnome and Rat because it's the only graphic novel that I currently have published. My story kind of sounds a little bit like Rivka's story, in the sense that it was an idea that happened very quickly and then sold very quickly. I don't think that that's because of any one detail. I think that what happened was that I got an idea that I really understood very well, and I understood it globally. Like I really felt that whatever happened in this story was less relevant than the feeling you got when you were reading it. And so in that sense, what I tried to do with my pitching was to communicate what this book would feel like, but also what additional books would feel like, because I was looking at the market. And for the beginner, the early graphic novel, which is my category, these books were selling in 3s, or series. Publishers were wanting this series, so I wanted to make sure that I had enough of a world in my idea that I could proceed, make more books, have more stories, instead of it just being a one and done. So it was much more about communicating to editors who these characters were, what kind of world are they living in, what kind of adventures do they have, and how do they relate to each other. So that was my attempt, and good luck to me. I'm sorry, I don't do Zoom, so I may share absolutely baffling things. Okay, is this working?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so this is the pitch packet that I eventually sent out. You can see that the characters changed dramatically from when they began, but I just wanted to get a sense of how these guys interacted with each other. And the way that I developed them was to figure out early on what it was that I felt was most important about the relationships and the world, and then never lose sight of that. Change anything else, but don't change that. So, like, for example, one of the rules that I made for myself is that neither of these characters ever express disdain or derision. They can disagree, or they can do anything they want, but even for a food, even for a thing that they see, there's never a serious sense of negativity. And this was a COVID book, so that was really important to me. So these were just the character bios that I ended up sharing. This was, I'm sorry, a lot of text, but I'm just going to explain it. You don't have to read it. It was a quick summary of who these characters are, then basically a sense of the stories that I would put in a series of 3 books. I listed out the chapter titles because I felt like the chapter titles kind of gave a good sense of what was going to be in that book. And then after that, I included synopses of each of the stories that I had listed. Following that, so this was kind of an example of how that looked when I sent it to my agent before we had sent it out. And you can see kind of her comments here, which were so great. for example, is there a theme for each book? And it ended up that, yes, there was a theme for that book. But in the beginning, there wasn't. I was just like, yeah, stories, throw them in there. And let's see, this was the like primordial illustration style, which also changed. And I have a story about that, which I will share. So in terms, let me start here. So what I ended up doing, because I had never done a graphic novel before and I was pitching one, and my agent suggested, like, these people do not know what you can do. You don't know what you can do. And you really should give us a sense of what this would look like, as close to finished as possible. And so I did that. And what I found was that I do best writing my script after everything else is done. I have the idea, I have the synopsis, I'll go through and draw it. And as I'm drawing, the synopsis will change and the dialogue will slightly change. And then I'll change the drawing a little bit. And so they really talk to each other. And at the end, I go back and I write the script like I'm writing a radio teleplay. That's just, what am I seeing? What did I end up putting on the page? Even now, when I do the scripts in advance of a book, because I have to, it changes when I'm drawing it. And I think at this point, 3 books in, my editor trusts me not to make terrible changes, but also knows that it's not going to be exactly what the script is, because the drawings will always talk back, especially with timing. If you're trying to do humor, it's something that just happens for me on the page as I'm doing it. So another example. So here's on the left what went into the pitch, and on the right is what ended up in the final book. So they actually turned out very similarly, with changes, but if I hadn't gone to drawing to final art for the pitch, I think I would have lost a lot of the moments that came up as I was drawing it. Because like half of us here probably, I think in moments, I think in moving pictures. And so to capture which moment it is was very significant to me. And so here's, the script that I went in and wrote after the fact. But I had to do it, and it was part of the pitch packet. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. So that was basically my process of making the pitch packet. I wanted them to be able to open that book in their mind and feel what it would feel like. So once we got that, and my agent was approving of the pitch packet, my agent is Tao Lei, by the way, and she's fantastic. She sent that out, and much like Rivka, it was very fast interest, and we were able to sell the book in a couple of weeks. It was an auction. It was not as successful as your auction, but it was great for me because it allowed me to do this. And I think another thing that I think is worth mentioning if you are pitching a graphic novel is sort of along the same lines as figure out what you love about that story, like figure out what is important to you that you will never break. That the answers to those questions should be taken along with you on the calls with editors who want to acquire your work, because you can sell something for a little bit more, but you'll have to make changes to it, and you might not love the thing that happens after those changes are made, but you're going to be working on it for years. So make sure that you know what it is that you want to protect when you get those calls, so that the project that happens is the project that you know and love. But even better, because obviously editors will give you gold, which you should not refuse. Their ideas are like amazing and will change your work for the better, as long as you don't sacrifice the stuff that means something to you.
Lauren, you've been getting a lot of feedback that you're giving really good advice.
Oh, good. That's great. Okay.
All right. Caroline.
Hi, I'm going to screen share. All right, so this is a story called The Little Scientist. It is a YA STEM-inspired fiction book. And it's inspired, by myself and my life training as a scientist and being a young adult and trying to figure out something new about the universe and figure out myself at the same time. And so this book is really trying to convey, I guess, the emotional truth of going through that journey, not so much teach you any biology. And I'm just going to show, I have the synopsis and some sample pages up right now on my website. I also have a full outline that I included in my pitches. And I would say, I've gotten nibbles from 3 editors. I've never heard from an agent. So that is where I am at this moment. And this story is the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart. So thank you for that comment, Lauren, because I do think that at this point, I've drawn finished like a fifth of it. And I'm ready to have an agent and editor help me make it better. But I do not see myself completely reshaping it, trying to get a book picked up. Yeah, scroll through the end and just kind of ends with the main character and her sidekick coming together.
Caroline, do you think you could say something about your, like, why you started the group that you started, the Agent Quest group? Because I feel like I just love that you did that. And I sometimes think people underestimate how important it is to do things like that, to sort of be part of a group and be generous to the wider community.
Sure. I mean, I think it's at that point, I think I had been, working at this for a few months, and I really realized that having some amount of social accountability and community really helped me too. So it was like a mutually benefiting thing. It was not just me being generous. And I also thought that there were so many different sources of information about how to pitch. And absolutely, there's not going to be like one perfect way of doing it, but I wanted to have a place where people could kind of come together, compare notes, and then just go for it. Because I will say, that first send was scary. But once that was over and, the world didn't collapse on me, I was just like, oh, I could totally do number 2, 3, and 4. And so I hope that by working through the group, either synchronously or asynchronously in the future, people can also just get over that first hump.
I just to circle back to Brigitta's presentation, Brigitta, I just loved what you showed about like non-responses and, less than ideal part of the process, because it happens to so many people. I mean, even Rivka, you had this amazing auction, but you spent many years in a way like wandering in the wilderness in a sense. I mean, I feel like I did as well. That's what I call it. Okay, so I'm sure people have questions. I've seen a bunch of questions in the chat, but I haven't been paying attention because I've been moderating. So I think maybe what would be good is if people could raise your hand if you want to ask a question. And definitely, okay, Jack, I think, is that it says Tier Thomas Arts.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah,
I have
okay.
2 emails, so I signed in with my business email today for some reason. So this is kind of a logistical question. When I've been looking at agents, almost all of them now use Query Manager. And most of the query managers, they say, oh, we're taking graphic novels, but most of the query managers are kind of set up as though they're assuming it's a novel. So there's a section that's like the first 10 pages of your book, but then they have another section that's like, put your sample art here. And then, they have a short synopsis, but then maybe in your pitch, you have a long synopsis. And I'm kind of wondering about like, where do you put the different parts of your pitch in a query manager that's sort of set up for novels rather than graphic novels?
I can take this one because I was in the exact same position as you. And basically what I found to work the best is just to ask the agent So typically what I would do though, you know, if we don't have that familiarity yet, is you can put a link. So what I would typically do is I would have like a Google Drive, which does allow the file size, because that was one of the things that drove me crazy about Query Manager, is that you can't include large file size. So it's pretty much impossible for pitch packages. But if you include a link to your drive and just make sure it's accessible by them, that should be good enough. But if you want to ask them, that's also an alternative. Sometimes on their website, they might mention, like, if you have a pitch package, you can email them directly. So I think it just really depends on the agent and the agency. But in general, I'd say usually if you add just like a link to it, you should be fine.
Cool. I'm glad to hear that, because I'm a little bit nervous. I'm like, do I have to do it exactly the way they're asking, or is it okay if I like fudge the thing a little bit? And I'm like, well, this isn't the first 10 pages of my book, but here is what I have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's and I also know for some of them, they'll have, you know, oh, you should actually put the outline like within the Query Manager submission form. So in those cases, what I did, I just like copied it over. And so it have all of the categories kind of broken up based on what they request in Query Manager. But then I would just send them like a Google Drive link with like just the spreads and maybe the cover. But again, every agent's different. I'm sure Jana can probably attest to, you know, what she does on her end.
Yeah, I don't use the query. Is it Query Manager or Query Tracker? I don't use it, so I don't know. But I kind of feel like what the advice that you're giving, Brigitta, is perfect. You just kind of have to not exactly follow the rules, but make sure your stuff is available for them to look at. Okay, Nadia, and then Jeff, and then Tim.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I raised my hand because that was the only way to get attention. Rivka, that's for you. I wanted to comment because someone had asked if all of us are author illustrator. I'm author only, so my pitch was via it was a text only pitch, and I already have it pulled up and I can share screen if that's okay, just for you to see it, and then
Yeah.
I'll drop the link in the chat so you can see what it looks like, because I know the insanity with being text only and how do you pitch your package, and everyone's always wondering. This is what I pitched when I pitched last year. So this is My Pet Phoenix, and you know, I pitched it as middle grade, page count 200 to 250 because that's generally the range for that kind of age group. And the genre was adventure, fantasy, fiction, magical realism. And then I just put in like snapshots or screen grabs of the actual pages as I had them written. And this is one of the formats, like in the Dark Horse format, that you don't want to use this format, by the way. So I'm gonna so disregard the format, but like, you know, it would just be plain text in the future going forward, like if I were to pitch again. But that's what I shared, like about like the first 4 pages, and then what my why was, and then of course like my bio and my picture. And so that's what an author text only pitch would look like, unless you doodle and you wanted to share a doodle, but I probably wouldn't share that because I wouldn't feel like that reflected my best work, so I just keep it strictly as text. But that's what it looks like.
Thanks for that, Nadia. All right, Jeff.
About the pitch package and Query Manager in particular, some people say don't send us anything more than we ask for. What I've done though is sometimes I've linked to my fuller pitch package on my OneDrive, and I haven't been sure if that's wise to do or not, to just give it to them right away or to make them request it. Any advantage or disadvantage to do that? And also, given that I'm using OneDrive, I don't really have analytics to see whether or not they actually went in to look at it. Do you guys use any sort of analytics?
Well, for me, so I did it differently based on different agents. So I remember there was one agent I submitted to, And basically so I didn't submit it with the pitch package PDF, but she had seen my pitch because of a Twitter pitch. So she kind of already knew me. And I remember afterwards, I just asked her, it's just because she requested more pages. And I was like, where would you like me to send it? And this was after she had requested, from me submitting it through Query Manager. And she was just like, yeah, just send me a OneDrive, send to my email. I think there are benefits to both. So I think sometimes if you submit an image and you have a good style, then they'll want to see more and they can always request more pages. But if you don't send anything up front and you're relying on them kind of responding to you, then they might not get to see your style if you are an illustrator, in which case it could potentially either hurt you or help you, just depending on if they are drawn to your story. So I think it really depends. It's kind of a per agent basis on if you want to take the chance and, kind of show the style up front, or if you want to see if they like it, respond, and then request more. I've seen it gone both ways personally. So it just depends. But in regards to tracking, I personally, because a lot of the agents I submitted to weren't using Query Manager, like there were a couple that did, but there were ones that didn't. So I personally just kept like an Excel sheet of all the agents I submitted to, the submission or what I submitted to them. Because for some of the agents, I submitted different things. So I wanted to see which ones maybe they requested more materials and worked better than ones that maybe rejected the materials. So I also kind of kept a spreadsheet of what I submitted to them and then the response times. And so for me, that was really easy because also if they start scheduling calls with you, you want to make sure you do your background research. So I also included tidbits of like the agents and then who they represented in the past and a lot of like details. But for me, it was more so just personal tracking because not all of them use Query Manager. So I needed to keep track of everything on my own account.
Anybody else on the panel have thoughts on this?
I know when I submitted to Jana, I didn't send her a link or anything to my pitch. And my work, I did have my website, I believe, but I queried her first to make sure I could pitch. Because I think you were closed.
Yeah, I've been closed basically for a long time.
Yeah, you were currently
I have a lot on my plate.
Yeah, but I had a referral. So I was like, my first email was, can I send you my pitch? And when I pitched to Jana, I pitched myself because I didn't have a specific project yet. I don't think I had 5 wishes yet, did I?
Maybe not.
I don't think so. I think I really kind of took the approach of looking for an agent for my career. And so I sent a really long email to Jana. Everyone's like, send short emails, but I went out of my way to get really personal because I knew Jana was the agent I wanted and she was the only agent that I queried. So I kind of made it at the end as well as like, this is an exclusive submission. I definitely made sure to add that at the end. And I did include my website because I had my portfolio and stuff on there, but it's very minimum at the time. Jana's gotten me to rework everything. So yeah, and I don't do a tracker. I find trackers drive me up the wall. I used to do that. I used to upload everything into an FTP. And when I'd submit packages to editors, because this was before agents even represented graphic novelists, I used to, they've opened it, stuff like that. I don't do that anymore because it drives you nuts. It just drives you nuts. I'm just like, once it's out, it's out. And if I don't hear, then I don't hear. And if I do, then it's great. For me, mentally, health-wise, I prefer not to track it.
Interesting perspective. Yes, makes sense. Okay, Tim.
Oh, thank you for this meeting. It's been really informative. Just a question about the response time for a query. Is there like a window of response with shortest to longest? And if you do resubmit, is it by request or can you just wait a couple of months to resend it refined?
Mm-hmm. Do you guys on the panel have any thoughts on this? Yes, Lauren?
Okay, so my mine are kind of scattered, previously in picture books and graphic novels, but I've had wait times of like 2 weeks, and I've had recently a request for revision on a manuscript that went out 1 year ago. So it really varies for
I can
me.
speak to that as well, Lauren. I agree with you because as a picture book author, I can tell you I have had responses within minutes that we've submitted where it's either a yes for like a rewrite or just plain like, no, it's not for our list. To this is a manuscript of my heart. It was out on sub for 4 years last year. And the editor reached out and said they really wanted the story. They loved it. They asked for an R&R. It took me a year to do the R&R because it was a very personal and emotional story. And she took it to acquisitions, and it took her a week to get back to me to respond. So in essence, 5 years, 1 week for that manuscript. However, I revised according to her specifications, and she ended up helping develop the manuscript to a point where it's so much better than what we were out on sub with originally, that my agent was like, okay, onwards. We're gonna just start subbing that version out now. So we took that version, and now that's currently out on sub. But because it's a difficult subject matter, I don't expect it to happen very quickly, but I've gone from minutes to like months to years. So it varies.
I can say as an agent, I have had the exact same experience with projects, from immediate response to years later out of the blue. Really crazy. I see that Bob, you had a really good question in the chat, which I think I'd love to hear from our panelists about. I have received 22 rejections so far, but I'm reworking my whole story once again. I love my story, but getting a bit discouraged. How do you keep going?
May I answer this?
Mhm.
Because I've been doing this for 20 years, since 2003. You got to make it for yourself at some point, and not care if it gets published. I had my first 2 graphic novels I had published. I had just started making comics. I had my first book published within 2 years. And the next book came out the next year. So when I got started in the industry, it was really fast. And then there was silence. It was just dead, because 2008 was a recession, publishing, everyone started merging. They stopped. I sent out a pitch packet to an editor that had actually requested it the day before the stock market crashed in 2008. And the next day, all the publishers were like, we're shutting our doors. So like timing. So I worked on a series that I loved called Jane's SOS for 7 years. And I said I was going to self-publish it. And you know what? I never did. I've got literally stacks and stacks of ink pages, of storyboards, of pencils, 3 volumes. And you know what? It's sometimes either you got to self-publish or you got to let your babies go and move on to the next project. And I'm very much, you got to do some soul searching, right? And I knew it wasn't, I don't know which was the right answer. Should I self-publish it? Maybe, but now I have 5 niches. So I do feel if you're sending out something and you keep getting rejection after rejection after rejection, and you're feeling really frustrated, it's probably time to move on to the next project, and then maybe come back and revisit it later when you have a fresh perspective, because otherwise the frustration it eats at you. It eats at you after a while. That's my feeling on that.
Oh, Nadia and Lauren, I feel like both of you raised your hand.
I'll let Lauren go.
Yeah, to echo what Rivka just said, I think it's super valuable to keep the idea in your back pocket, move on to something else. You will end up getting a critique on another project. that later, when you go back to that first idea, you're like, oh, okay, I totally get why this wasn't getting bought. I see the problem. The problem is now easy for me to fix because I have, leveled up, and it will just be so clear to you. But if you don't move on or try something else, even if it's not for professional, like you're not trying to sell another book, just make something for yourself or critique other people's work or anything to break yourself out of who you are right now so that you can be the person that can go back and fix your own work.
All right,
I'm with
Nadia.
both Lauren and Rivka on this. So I don't want to repeat what they just said, but two things. One is, have you asked or requested any kind of feedback from the rejections that you're getting? Because sometimes editors or even agents, if you ask the right way, sometimes they might respond to you and say, they'll give you a reason. Either there's not enough emotion, or it's not resonating with them, or there might be just one thing that you might be able to go back and fix, and you might see a difference in that manuscript. So that's one. And two, when you do put it on the back burner and you give it space to breathe, sometimes you don't want to revise according to other people's specifications, because when you're writing a story, your story has to be genuine. It has to be from the heart. And one of my critique partners, this happened to her, where she kept revising because she desperately wanted to sell the manuscript because it was the story of her heart. But the time wasn't right because she kept going back and changing it to the point where she didn't even recognize the manuscript anymore. So what I would do is go back to the original manuscript that you wrote and just sit with it and remember the whole reason why people buy books, whether it's editors, readers, and agents reach out to you and they want to represent you, is because they want to make sure that the story you're telling is true from the heart and it resonates. Emotional resonance is universal. So always remember that when you're writing your manuscript. Even when you get feedback, if you don't agree with it, don't do it just because you're desperate to land a book deal or land representation. Always write what your truth is.
And one more thing I wanted to add, because I definitely echo what everyone's saying. I would also go back to, what's your goal? Like, is your goal that you want to get this story out, or is it to get a story out? And I think, sometimes you have to think about, do you want to publish a book that maybe, or get a book out there that maybe might be a little bit easier of a sell just to get your career off the ground? Or is this the story of your heart? Like, this is the one that you want out there. Maybe you don't really necessarily care as much about traditional publishing, and self-publishing is an option to go. So I would just definitely consider, this is the first book that you need to push to the world, or is there another book that might be a little bit more marketable if you want to do traditional publishing? Because the reality is, traditional publishing is partly a business at the end of the day. And just because you love your story doesn't necessarily mean, everybody from the traditional publishing world will also love it and see the marketability of it. So sometimes it might be that there might be another story that is more marketable that you can put out there, and then come back to this other story at some point once you've kind of made a name for yourself. But yeah, I would just really go back to, is there another book that's more marketable? And if not, and if this is the only book and you're really passionate about it, just, as others have said, either take a break from it for a while, you can come back to it. Definitely ask peers for advice, get a critique group if you don't have one. There's a lot of auctions that go up to for agents and editors, like the Maui auction that recently happened, where you can bid in order to get an agent or editor to review your work. That oftentimes gives a lot of really great feedback. The speed pitching, there's a lot of things you can do to get feedback to see what might not be working. But at the end of the day, if like you've submitted to, hundreds and hundreds of agents, nothing's landing, maybe it's time to see if there's another book that might be a little bit better suited for traditional publishing, just to get your feet a little bit wet.
One other thing I wanted to add that you sort of alluded to, I think, Rivka, is just external factors. Like, the industry is so up and down and up and down. And like, it seems like there's times when everybody's like spending money. And then there's time when everybody's like, let's close the purse strings. And also, you know, like the 2008 financial crisis had huge impact, and it derailed a lot of people's careers, and that can happen. I don't know, right now, to me, I feel like we're in kind of a weird time with acquisitions and publishers, but not as dramatic as 2008, but I get a weird vibe at the moment. I just want to say that. Okay, let's see. Tim, I saw you just raise your hand, but there was a question in the chat from somebody about, oh shoot, it was about finding an agent, I think. Does anybody know?
That was my question. So,
oh, okay, yeah.
Basically, it seems like everybody and their mother and their brother is repping graphic novels these days. But for an agent who maybe doesn't know what to look for, or like hasn't worked on that many graphic novel projects and is just trying to dip their toes into it, how can we make sure that it's someone that is going to be a good fit for us, or that they know enough of what they're doing to help us?
Look at, if you're approaching an agent, go to their website, look and see who they've repped, because all agents are going to have their clients. You want to go through their whole client list, and you should do this regardless of even the graphic novel stuff, because you want to see if your work's appropriate for them. I know a lot of artists that do this to see if their style is appropriate for this agent. Writers do it to see if their style is appropriate for this agent. An agent that's never had a graphic novel published, or sold a graphic novel, I would seriously hesitate with, unless you've met them in person. Maybe they're huge graphic novel fans and they came from editing graphic novels, but they've never actually started being an agent. That would be acceptable. I think there are exceptions, but you got to kind of look at their history, and you can ask agents, you can ask them questions. You don't have to, if you're kind of wondering, you could communicate with agents and ask them questions and say, hey, have you repped any graphic novelists? And Publishers Marketplace, I would imagine, would be a place you can look up agents, what they've published under, or what they've not published, sorry, what they've signed under Publishers Marketplace, right, Jana?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in case they're not listed on their website.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jenny.
Thank you.
So Lauren said something in the chat about her process and how she had been nervous at the beginning that the script would go out and then it would be set in stone. So this is something that's been making me really anxious, is if it goes out and then I'm doing sample art. What if something changes, and then am I married forever to how do people feel like they're buying something from a catalog, and this is what it is, right? It's like the roll neck, sweater, and then my sample art, right? So I'd love to hear what you all think about that.
Lauren, did you want to jump on that?
Yeah. Okay, so I can tell you my experience, because my stuff did change. That one spread that I showed remained very much the same. But so I'm going to give an example from book 3, which I just finished. The synopses for book 3 had been submitted with my initial pitch packet. And just now it came up again as we finished book 2, and the editor looked at the synopsis for 3 and was just kind of like in the kindest way, most supportive way possible, nah. And so they gave me some tips, and then I went back and rewrote the entire thing, because I had tried to implement they were like, what if we change this and this and this? And so I was down there and I'm like, I can't make this work. I know that this is not a good story. And so I rewrote the whole thing, and I emailed them very nervously, and I was like, look, I know it's totally different, but I think this addresses all your notes. And they got back to me and they were like, yeah, that's it. And it was not a big deal. We all wanted the same thing, which was to make the best book. So if you come up with an idea that's better and you're halfway through, no one who agrees with you is going to say, no, we have to stick to that thing that we wrote down a year ago. So especially if you pick an editor who shares your vision, I would not worry as much about that. The end game is the same. They want to make a great book and they want to make your book if they bought your book. So that's what I have to say about that. You can throw the whole thing in the trash, start over again. It will be okay.
I agree with everything you said, Lauren. So I don't know if I have anything to add. Does anybody else have anything to add on this? Okay. I do think I need to wrap things up for today, but this was such an awesome roundtable discussion. Thank you, everybody who came to watch and to ask questions and listen, and thank you to our speakers. If everybody could unmute yourself, and this time I'm going to remember and I'm going to take a picture of everybody. I've got so bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
See you around.
Thank you very much.
Bye.